Good day. I'd like to welcome you to this presentation of Plymouth Profiles. Plymouth Profiles is an opportunity for us to meet with people from the greater Plymouth community. And today I'm delighted to have returning as our guest, Father John Culloty. He is from St. Mary's here in Plymouth, and he is returning as a guest. Welcome, Father John.
Stephen, always nice to be with you.
Thank you for being here. So we first met during COVID when we were doing the weekly updates, and as a leader of the Plymouth faith community, you often joined us and gave us updates. But for people that may not have seen you at that time or since then, give us a little bit of your background. Where'd you grow up? What's your training and education?
Yep. Well, I grew up in Brighton, Massachusetts. I'm a city kid, and Plymouth might as well have been in Yugoslavia because we didn't own a car. So if there's a streetcar or the bus didn't go there, you didn't go there. So at any rate, grew up there, went to school in our own area, then off to a place called Mission High School, which is located in Roxbury part of Massachusetts. The night before, I was in the 8th grade, my parents were having a debate. My mother wanted me to go to Boston Latin School because it has a great reputation. It's been around forever. My father said, you can go to Catholic school because the brothers will put some discipline into him, which they did. So I had no say in the matter at all, but off I went to Mission High School in Roxbury, had a great education from the brothers that taught there. Then after that, I went into the seminary. And the seminary is an 8-year program, 4 years of college, 4 years of graduate school. So I finished my training in 1972.
Where was the seminary?
We started the first years were in Jamaica Plain, first years of college. Then the last 6 years were in Brighton. That's now the campus, for the most part, that Boston College now owns. They use that. It's right across the street from BC. And so 53 years ago, I started my first assignment, which was in Salem, Massachusetts. Again, I didn't know how to get to Salem. I know it's something to do with witches. So I spent 7 very happy years there. I'm still in contact with a lot of people from those days. Then I moved to parish in Framingham, Mass. And then I decided to do something different. So I became a college chaplain at 2 colleges, Wellesley College and Framingham State, those 2. So it was a very, very interesting contrast because Wellesley, as you know, is an all-female school, 2,200 women and me. I'm still single, which doesn't speak well for my my outgoing personality in Framingham State. But we did some wonderful trips to Haiti over the years. I'm delighted too that St. Mary's and St. Joseph's and Kingston have a program working with people from Haiti. So I did that for a number of years. Then I was sent to a parish in South Boston. Following that, I went to Norwood for a number of years, and then a collaborative called Medfield in Norfolk. When I turned 72, I think, there was open what they call a senior priest. You could go to a parish and help the pastor there. You do everything that you normally would do in a parish, except you don't have to do the administrative part, which is a gift. So that's how I ended up at Plymouth and Kingston, and I've been there ever since.
Good.
And it's been, I think, 7 or 8 years.
So I went to law school at Boston College, and one of my professors was a Jesuit. Father Nicholson was there at the time. I wasn't there when Father Drinan was there. That was before my time, but got a great education from him and from them.
Jesuits are great scholars.
Yes.
They don't do masses too well. They always say successful Jesuit masses when nobody gets hurt because their specialty usually is education or social services, that type of thing. But they're wonderful, wonderful folks.
So I grew up in Kingston. I'm familiar with St. Joseph's, and I've lived my adult life in Plymouth. And so certainly I've been to St. Mary's for any number of events. And but tell us a little bit about the churches.
Well, what amazes me in a way is that, when Cordage was up and flourishing, a lot of immigrants came to Plymouth to work at Cordage. Hard work. It wasn't easy. It wasn't sitting at a desk all day. You were really doing heavy manual labor. They were so much wanted a church of their own, these immigrants, that they would come down to the site of present-day St. Mary's. They would dig the foundation by hand. I can't imagine, after a full day's work in the hot sun in the factory, coming down there and digging out the foundation by hand. So they had a great attachment to that community. Of course, they'd always say, too, North Plymouth was like, you never had to go anyplace else because everything was there. Sure. You had a movie theater, you had supermarkets, everything. And you get the old North Plymouth people together. You can't stop them from talking. I mean, they just go on. So-and-so lived here. It's great memories that they have of that, but it was kind of a world unto itself. And so now, because of the shortage of priests, we're combining a number of parishes. They stay independent of one another. So St. Joseph's is one entity, St. Mary's another. But you try to do a lot of cooperative types of activities. Better utilize your volunteers and your staff. The very strong Brazilian community at Mary's, they have a 7 o'clock Mass in Portuguese on Sunday evenings, but they also have other activities during the week. There's a strong outreach to the poor. On Saturday afternoons, you can walk into the hall of St. Mary's right down the street from the church. Meals served, no matter who you are, you just walk in and you're helped and given a meal. And then the winter months, in cooperation with the other churches in town, they have a program for the homeless, a shelter overnight, which is a blessing for some of these poor people that are living on the street, basically. So there's a lot of, I think, good work that gets done. Sometimes that's under the radar screen, unless you're directly involved, then you don't really know it's happening. But there's a lot of outreach to people that are struggling. And great devotion to that parish, people that spent all their life there. It was the center of their social as well as their religious lives, and they don't forget that. And so there's been very meaningful cooperation and contributions from the people that grew up in that part of the world.
You never probably even know how you touch people in the community, even those not in the parish. I know growing up in Rocky Nook, I spent a lot of my time in North Plymouth. I could walk. Sure. And at the beach that we had, Father John was currently there in the 50s at St. Mary's, and it was an interesting experience because I would always see him in a bathing suit in the water, swimming, and all the other kids and families, who knew him. And I'm thinking, how come I don't know him? But I got to know him just because he was someone that lived locally and would come and swim just like the rest of us.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that. When I was in Salem, my first assignment, again, I was only 25 years old, and I would pile 8 kids in the back of my car and go to the beach for the day. The beach is all over the place in the North Shore. But so years later, I go back to Salem to go to a wake, and this kid, Charlie Abel, comes up to me and says, "Remember how you used to take a whole group of us to the beach?" I said, "Yeah, sure, I remember that. We used to do it all the time." And he said, "You knew I was Jewish." I said, "Yeah, I knew that." In fact, his grandparents escaped the Holocaust in Germany. And he said, "My mother always warned me, don't go near Father Culloty in the water because he'll baptize you secretly." He said, "I don't really believe that at one point in time." He said, because I knew that was, just, they were old school and, very nervous about interfaith types of things. But he said, "Yeah, that was my experience about beaches and priests."
It's interesting how that was. I mean, I also, my first exposure to snow skiing was with St. Joseph's CYO.
Okay.
In high school, I would go off to New Hampshire to a ski trip and kind of slide down the mountain.
That was a big thing, CYO ski trips.
Yeah.
And I tell you, we'd take kids who had never been on skis in their lives, and they'd say, "This black diamond, that looks interesting. And why no one died or was killed or crashed into someone?" I don't know. It was a miracle. It really was a miracle. But that's, not to get into really heavy stuff, but Sally, the sexual abuse thing really changed the tenor of people's relationship with the church, especially young people. Honestly, I never felt uncomfortable because I think people in the parish knew who I was and thank goodness trusted me. But I had bonds with those first kids in my first parish who are now in their 60s.
Sure.
We get together and do things together. You can't quite have that same relationship now, which is sad.
All of us as professionals actually have to be careful.
Yeah.
I mean,
I knew people, teachers said, when a kid came in and said their grandfather died that morning, I put my arm around the kid. I can't do that anymore. He said, just feels so unnatural not to be able to do that. But
when you talk about the outreach, I just think back to those experiences as a child, and that was my exposure really to the Catholic Church, and they were very positive.
Yeah.
And then the last thing would be my cousin is not quite a year older, and I was very close to him. And so when I would go up to Charlestown to spend time with him, I would go to Sunday school with him at the Catholic Sunday school. And yet when he would come here, he would say, "I can't go into your church." So it was different. And so as a child, it was like, I couldn't really understand that. Like, why is that? But of course, as we get older, but even so, the exposure was always good because, I always felt it was good to be what now we would call ecumenical.
Sure. Yeah.
and interfaith. So speaking of that, in Plymouth, where does St. Mary's fit in the faith community?
They, as I said, the homeless program is a big part of a cooperative effort. So all the churches take their share of time hosting that, which is very, very valuable. Those old days of my parents were born in Ireland, and back in those days, they would say literally, if you went to a Protestant church as a Catholic, people thought you were damned to hell.
Right. That's what my cousin thought.
Yeah, those prejudices lived for a while. Thank goodness they're all gone now. I just with a couple the other day. I'm doing their wedding in September down in Rhode Island, but he's Catholic, she's Jewish, and I talked to the rabbi the other day. We're going to work out a nice service together. I did a couple of Hindu Catholic weddings, so what I think is so important is listen to people's story. Instead of coming in with a prejudice ahead of time, saying, well, this person, because they're this, that, or the other thing must be, listen to people's stories. Sometimes I learn much more from people listening to where they come from and what their experiences has been. I know, when couples come and get married, for example, I'm fascinated to know, why are you getting married in a church context? What does that mean to you?
Sure.
And I think if I start with the hot button issues, well, we're going to kind of choose sides, Right. What's your experience of value? What did Jesus teach? Right. And you talk a lot about patience, forgiveness, second chances, understanding. Those are the things that make a marriage a success. You have to have those values. So we start talking about values first. Yeah, talk about the other things later on, but I think it's important to listen to people's story and give them a chance to voice how they feel.
That is true. My wife was raised Catholic, and when we got married in the early 70s and met with the priest that married us, it turned out that just before we got married, they said we received a special dispensation from the Pope because she was marrying me and I wasn't Catholic. But we were able to work it out and get beyond the fact that we came from different churches.
The person that made a big impact on that, it goes back into history, but is Cardinal Cushing. I don't know if that rings a bell or not, but he was the Archbishop of Boston up until around 1972. I think he died around the early 70s. But his sister married a Jewish fellow. Now, this is way, way back, which was unheard of. But he was very sensitive to interfaith relationships. So once upon a time, if you were Catholic and your wife was Protestant, you got married in a church rectory. You didn't get married in church. And then with Cardinal Cushing, he said, that's ridiculous. Right. Get married in church. Yeah. Then it used to had to be outside the altar rail. And he said, that's ridiculous too. Bring them and treat them like you treat everybody else. And that was a real breakthrough for its time. Of course, the Jewish community loved him because he was a great fundraiser. And there was a racetrack up in New Hampshire somewhere. It was owned by a Jewish fellow. And he would get one day's proceeds of the racetrack every year for his charities. And he didn't keep it for himself. He really gave the money away as fast as he got it. But the Smiths, I think, Lou Smith. And but that was, again, the breakthroughs didn't happen way up here somewhere. It happened down on a local level,
Sure. That was in 72. And being that you were in Salem, you might know of the Annunciation Church in Danvers.
Sure. Yeah.
Because that's where we got married at the time.
A kid from my first parish is the pastor there now.
Oh, okay.
Talk about being old, I tell you. Yeah.
So Plymouth, tell us a little bit about, well, I really want to, before we run out of too much time, when we first planned to get together, Pope Francis had passed and we were going to talk about selecting a new Pope. But actually since then, a Pope has been selected, Pope Leo. And tell us a little bit about the new Pope and your feelings about that.
I feel very positive, to be honest with you. A couple of things about him. Number one, he has had a lot of administrative experience now. Merrimack College is run by the Augustinians. He was the head of that whole order, which is a worldwide order. So he's got some administrative experience. He worked in the Vatican for a couple of years. So again, he knows a little bit about the inner workings of the Vatican. He lived in Peru for over 20 years. You can't live in a country like that and see the extremes of wealth and poverty and not be life changed. Like It'd have to be a stone, right? So I think he appreciates that fact. So I think he'll very much be in the mode of Pope Francis. I think he's probably a little more thoughtful. Pope Francis, he's a Jesuit, and so sometimes they say things off the cuff and, see how it flies, I think he'll be a little bit more measured probably in his, they tell me he's a great listener, that he really likes to listen to where you're coming from, what your story is, before he says anything himself. The challenge, two challenges, I would say. You think I was a Vatican expert, I don't know. No, I think the two challenges, social media, stuff flies out. Some of it's true, some of it's not so true, but it gets out there very, very rapidly. Number two, the estimate is 1.3 billion Catholics in the world. That's a lot of people with a lot of different cultures, a lot of different values. So to say something that's significant to that large number of people is a real challenge. I think he will be a strong moral voice. I think he's going to talk a lot about the injustice between the rich and the poor, the haves and the have-nots. I think he'll talk a lot about world peace. He's already invited Zelensky and the Russian government to come to the Vatican and try to hash out some sort of agreement about the terrible situation in the Ukraine. So I see a lot of positives, but I'll give you an example, for example, of when Pope Francis said that, priests could bless a gay couple, which I think is wonderful. Hey, we bless your car, we bless your house, and we bless all sorts of things. People come up with their dogs and cats, we bless them. But again, talking about 1.3 million, in Africa, homosexuality is still in some places a crime. People can be sent to jail for that. So the bishops in Africa said, I don't think this is going to fly very well in our culture. So I think that's his challenge. How does one person speak to a wide variety of individuals with different backgrounds and histories and cultural norms? But I was fascinated by the number of people who were fascinated by this whole process. I don't know if it's the white smoke or the ritual going into it, but even people that weren't Catholic, some of the commentators on national news, they're saying, I'm not Catholic, but geez, I was really moved by the whole experience, So I have to be hopeful, and I think, again, he knows how to use social media, so he'll be able to get the word out that way. Again, so many people, their whole world they get the information from social media, which isn't always accurate. So I hope that his voice will be a positive voice. I hope they'll do it in a very creative way, in a very positive way, but help people say, there are two sides to a lot of stories, and be careful about. My philosophy is be slow to judge, be quick to forgive, because you never know where someone's coming from. So that's, again, where I feel it's very important to listen to a person's story and say, how'd you arrive at where you're at, and how can I help you to continue along that journey? So I hope he'll do much the same type of thing.
I was very excited about the whole process. My family, most of whom are not Catholic, were very happy with Pope Francis because of the values that he would talk about. Mm-hmm. One of the early things, who am I to judge? We love that because my family is not your 1950s.
Leave it to Beaver family.
Leave it to Beaver family. It's very diverse.
Yep.
And as I think most families are. And so we don't fit into the cookie cutter of what some people might say, this is what a family should look like.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was refreshing for Pope Francis and the things he said. And now when he passed, I was so hopeful that there would be a new pope who would have a lot of the same values and talk about them, as you talked earlier about New Testament and forgiveness and love. Many of the things that we as Christians learn in the New Testament and we try to follow don't seem to be, emphasized by elected officials at the national level.
Yeah.
And so that's disheartening because, it's just, the golden rule is just automatic, treat people as you'd want to be treated. Or
what moved me greatly was after the election of the President Trump, they had a prayer service at the National Cathedral. The Episcopal bishop gave, I thought, a spectacular talk. And she was very respectful, referred to Mr. President, and said, but please have compassion. Mm-hmm. Have compassion because there are people out there suffering in so many different, I think it's heartbreaking. I talked about this last Sunday. You look at the Sudan where babies are dying in their mother's arms because we don't have aspirin, basic stuff that we take for granted. This war in Ukraine just goes on, the bombings, the devastation, the whole Gaza thing, moving people, displacing them. They have no place to go.
Right.
It's heartbreaking. It really is.
Yeah.
And so if the Pope can do anything and be a voice to say, folks, let's take a second look at some of these things. We're wasting the resources that, we have no trouble. A jet falls off the aircraft carrier, $7 million jet, whatever it cost. If we put all that money into cancer research, we'd probably have cured or helped cure an awful lot of people. If I can make God a human, which we can't, but God is different than we are. But if you can make me, God must look down and say, folks, I've given you all these opportunities, I've given you these resources, these gifts. Use them in a positive way. Don't waste them. But sadly, that's been the history of humankind from the very beginning, unfortunately.
So Pope Leo is from the United States,
Mm-hmm.
which was also very exciting for many of us. What impact do you think he can have and may have on Catholicism in the United States and maybe in the greater Plymouth area?
Well, I think he understands our culture. He's been back and forth to Chicago many times over the years, even though he's been stationed in other places. So I think he very much knows the culture. Certainly his two brothers seem very down to earth about the whole experience. But the church was, in all churches, have been struggling. How do we attract younger people, especially 30, 40? I think my father made $5,000 a year working for Jordan Marsh. Young people are coming out with, $200,000, $300,000, $400,000 salaries, living, a good life. And I'm not being judgmental. I'm just saying, they have a lot of material things. But I've been reading studies lately saying that 30 and 40-year-old age group is really, there's something missing. We would tend to call it the spiritual dimension to a person's life. So after you have all the toys for a while, well, so I buy a Mercedes or a BMW, what difference does it make? But you got to touch the person's soul, I think. And I think he realizes that. So America, again, we have tremendous opportunities. He doesn't want us to squander them. And I think as a fellow American, he will be more comfortable speaking up about that because they'll say, hey, it's one of our own that's speaking about these issues. It's not someone that grew up in another country, another culture, not the difference. So I hope he can make an impact on the world, not just America. But
absolutely. Do you think it's going to result in some people that might have left the church returning to the church?
I hope so. Some studies have been done to say that is happening. Again, the 34, 40-year-old group that we seem to a little more challenged. When I was a young priest, no matter how religious or non-religious you were, if you had a kid, we baptized the kid, give the kid first communion, have confirmation in the 8th grade or high school, and then we kind of say, well, you're on your own after that. But those were the kind of the basics. Now I get grandparents coming to me and saying, would you baptize my grandchild? Parents said it's okay if we have it done, but they're not really interested in it. And basically, Grandma, you're going to have to kind of be responsible, which is a big challenge when you're, 78 years of age, trying to basically raise the child in faith. Plus, when I was in South Boston, sports are king. We used to plead with the coaches and say, could you on Sunday morning just leave 9 to 10 open? And that way kids won't have to decide between playing soccer or going to church. And we're going to design the churches so that they speak to these young people. We're going to speak their language. And the coach, it's just Father, we'd love to do it, but, we don't have soccer fields. We don't have enough, hockey rinks, so we have to schedule it 24/7. And I say, well, your kid's probably not going to grow up to be a Celtic or a Bruin, but we want the kid to grow up to be a good person. So let's see if we can help to develop this moral sense. They kind of see Pope Francis as like a pivotal figure. But the church is struggling before that. Materialism is kind of a constant battle that people fight. So we need a change. If we were going to be relevant, we need a change. And I think, when people say, well, what will happen when Pope Francis dies? I think they had to choose someone who would continue that trajectory because you can't turn the clock back. Life keeps moving forward at sometimes a very rapid pace. And I think we need people that choose to listen or not, but Jesus didn't have a lot of followers, he didn't end up on the success pages of the Jerusalem Times, and so sometimes, a moral religious leader will say something that's very, shakes us a little bit, But Jesus did the exact same thing, you know. He hung out with sinners. He ate at the house of the Pharisee. He, talked to the Samaritan woman. So he was a revolutionary character in his own right. We've kind of, I would say, watered things down, but we don't want to step on someone's toe. I don't discuss politics with people because in most cases it's either I'm here and you're there, and unfortunately,
Very
it's
polarized.
sad that we can't talk, even if we disagree at the end of the day. I said that Episcopal bishop, I was just enthralled with what she had to say. Sunday morning, I want to unite people. I don't want to divide people further than they're divided. I think in many ways, again, if you're going to discuss some of those challenging topics, you need to have a forum where, Steve can stand up and say, well, can you clarify that point a little bit? If I'm just preaching off the altar, well, you don't have that chance to raise your hand and say, it may be meant to say that in a different way, or can be considered a different point of view.
But it is true, you have New Testament and scriptures, and you can preach on them after the scripture reading and tie it in, and often it does come to be maybe something that seems political, but it's really not. It's right there.
Yeah. But you're an attorney, and I think you're probably successful because people trust you. You're not going to be the charlatan who tries to pull a fast deal because, what do I know if you're drawing up a trust or something like that. I think that's what we need to do as ministers, whether you're Catholic, Jewish, the rabbi down the street, whatever. We need to build up credibility with people. One of the unfortunate things, I was in one parish for 15 years. That's a fairly long time. So those kids that I knew when they were little are now getting married, and so they know me and call me and say, I'm getting married in South Carolina. Would you mind taking a trip down? Okay, sure. I'm glad to do it. Actually, I'm very glad to do it. But because we have a shortage of priests, we get moved around more frequently. If you do a half-decent job at Parish X, Parish Y is struggling, well, can you go over here 3 years after you've been there? So you don't build up that credibility, and I think that's the key. And all of our professions is to have people trust you.
Now, when you're not serving your parish and you're on your own and you just have free time to do something, what do you like to do in your first time?
My cardiologist said you should be walking more, and my PCP says you could stand to lose 10 pounds, that type of thing. Honestly, our retirement age officially is 75, so I turned that a couple of years ago. But I'm as busy as ever. I help out, do 2 parishes here on the weekends. Sometimes that's 2 or 3 services. I did a funeral of a Holy Family in Duxbury the other day for a family that I knew. Their mother died. I do Mass over at Manomet one day a week because the priest is here by himself, so it gives him a day off. So honestly, I don't know where the weeks go by, but they fly by. And I'm happy to do it. As I say, I don't have to do administrative stuff, which is a real blessing because that can just absorb so much time and energy and effort. And I'm not a big, I'm not like a big TV watcher or movie. I'll read, on my time off, but only because I think the doctor's looking somehow rather. I think he's got a drone or something follow me, but so I try to go every day, at least try to walk an hour and a half, something like that, just to keep things going.
Okay, well, thank you, Father John.
Stephen, you're always a pleasure.
To be
Always
here.
a pleasure.
So happy to have
Great
you,
to talk with you
as a leader in our faith community in Plymouth. And please stay tuned as we continue with this presentation of Plymouth Profiles. Thank you. Welcome back to this presentation of Plymouth Profiles. Today we have a second guest. I'm thrilled to have us once again Stephen Cole. He is the Executive Director for the Plymouth Economic Development Foundation. Welcome, Steve.
Hey, Steve. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being back. Steve, we first got to know each other kind of remotely during COVID.
That's
when
right.
You would be a frequent guest on our daily COVID update for the town of Plymouth. But before we get into anything, for people that don't know you, give us a little bit of your background. Where'd you grow up? What's your education, your training? How'd you get to where you are now?
Sure. Yeah. So I grew up on Cape Cod, graduated from Nassau Regional High School. I went to Westfield State for my undergraduate, initially kind of thinking of things like, criminal justice administration. My very first day, though, of freshman year was 9/11, and that kind of caused me to change my perspective a little bit. And so I studied world history and international relations. After that, I worked for a time for the city of Springfield. It was a dire time for the city. There was a control board running things. kind of changed my perspective again a little bit from more of a finance focus. I worked previously at Cape Cod Bank and Trust, so strong financial interests, to focusing on things like economic development. I mean, the city of Springfield was in desperate need for reinvestment. So it kind of got me thinking that, we can sit here counting beans all day long, but we need someone to make more beans. And so that's why I pivoted to economic development, got my master's in public policy and law from Trinity College in Hartford. Spent 5 years in Hartford, and then I boomeranged all the way back to Plymouth about 6 years ago.
Okay. What brought you to Plymouth?
I lived in every other part of the state at that point. I'd done North Shore, Western Mass, Cape Cod, of course, Boston, but Plymouth attracted me because, one, it was a high quality of life. My then significant other was going to Joint Base Cape Cod on a daily basis, and having grown up over the bridge, Steve, I made it very clear to Dan that I will get him as close to the bridge as possible without crossing it.
Okay.
And so we ended up settling in Buzzards Bay. And initially I was town planner in Carver.
Okay.
And then this position opened up at the Regional Economic Development Foundation about 6 years ago. So I applied for it.
So many people may not know what is the Plymouth Regional Economic Development Foundation.
Sure. So it's organized.
It's a lot of words.
It is a lot. So that's why we, and folks at home, please feel free to abridge it to the Plymouth Foundation. That's our DBA. But it is pretty descriptive of what we do. We are regional in focus. For all intents and purposes, a rose by any other name is still a rose. Plymouth is a town, but it is our center city. A lot of the services are here, and really it's a cross path for people leaving Cape Cod on their way to Boston. Springfield was experiencing certain types of issues when I was there that Plymouth wasn't. And it made me realize when I saw things on the ground, my gosh, Plymouth is the goal. Plymouth, for all intents and purposes, should be what other communities strive for. We adopted that philosophy with the PREDF board, or the foundation board. There's 13 members. I like to joke that Jesus did so much more with just 12. But the fact is, every one of our members have a really strong niche in something that contributes meaningfully to economic development. Our board president is Bill Hallisey, owner of Shiretown Glass, former select board member also. Jay Kimball is our vice president. He is owner of Wood Seafood, a very prolific member of the community, serves on things like A&F in the past.
He was the chair for many years.
He was,
yeah.
and now he's on the Parking Authority board. We also have Kevin O'Reilly, who was former chief of staff to Terry Murray. Now he's an operations director for a regional tech company.
He was an exec for the chamber for a while.
That's correct. Yep, he was one of my predecessors, in fact, when my role was combined with the executive director of the chamber, and that's since evolved into its own. And then we have Jack Meal, who is a retired banker and former executive director, president of the Chamber of Commerce. Yeah. So that's our executive team. And other members include former state rep Matt Muratori, Amy Naples from the Chamber of Commerce. We have a couple of we have a retired college president. So it's a really robust group. And the whole point, the whole goal of economic development is to enhance quality of life in our community. And that's really unique to each community. Some communities I've worked in, they prioritize things like transportation and housing. Here in Plymouth, at the Economic Development Foundation level, we prioritize land use. How we use our land matters. Entrepreneurship, we really want to foster that skill in people. Small business development, workforce development, and lastly, what we call MECA, marketing, events, and cultural assets. It's kind of a fancy term we use for tourism. Tourism is our backbone. We try and support our current institutions, but we want to grow it also. So using those other variables that I mentioned, we look at things like, could the town support a convention center or a conference hall? So we study that, and then we make recommendations to the town, and the town decides ultimately what to pursue. And
how often does the group meet?
We meet every month for about 90 minutes, but I'm in constant contact with these folks throughout the week. I mean, I'm pretty sure they're sick of receiving my calls, but it's a full-time job, and we respond to the conditions on the ground as much as we create our own programming too.
And how do people reach you?
Well, you can reach me through our website, plymouth-ma.biz, B-I-Z. You can also reach me directly on email, stephen.cole@plymouth-ma.biz.
Now, there have been some controversial issues that have come up in the past year. How does that relate to the foundation?
So I mean, I guess one way to consider what we are doing, we're kind of like project managers. If the town doesn't have the capacity or the staff to execute a goal that they set, and what is meant by the town, right? You're a town moderator. You know full well that the town meeting is our legislative branch, and then we have our select board, but we also have our planning board. We have our conservation commission, school committee. I mean, so what do you mean by the town, right? In this instance, the town back in 2018 changed zoning on a piece of land in South Plymouth. It's 33 acres next to a landfill. And the town made it very clear that they wanted to see commercial development happen there. It languished for a couple of years, I understand. I joined the team in 2019, and right around 2020, we entered into negotiations with the town to take over the land with a promise that when that land was sold, the town would receive $2 million. So if it was sold for less than $2 million, the foundation was on the hook to meet the delta. Bottom line, we did what we do. We applied for a grant from the state for site readiness. We prepared it for development as this town's wishes were captured in the zoning. And then in 2025, February this year, we ended up selling it to a developer who applied for his permits through the Concom, through the planning board, the ZBA, and received all of his permits consistent with the town zoning. And the foundation sold the property and gave the town its $2 million. So we fulfilled our obligation.
Good. So a couple of things. We're taping this in May of 2025.
Yes.
And the Town of Plymouth just had an election. How does that election and the results affect you, if at all?
So by our agreement with the town, we have an MOU that says that the town, 3 town employees serve on our board. So by virtue of their position, indiscriminate of who it is, they serve on our board. So the Director of Planning and Development, who currently is Lee Hartman, he serves. Derek Brindisi, the town manager, serves on the board also. And then the chairman of or chairperson of the select board serves on our board. And that's the position that has changed most often. When we started, Kenny Tavares was chairperson. He served on our board. Subsequently, we had Dickie Quintal. Betty Cavaco was chairperson for a time, and then it became Dickie again. And now we have Kevin Canty. So when the chairperson of the select board changes, that person comes onto our board and contributes very meaningfully to our discourse.
And is that going to change the foundation at all?
I wonder. I mean, it might change our focus and our goals. I mean, new chairman, new perspective, and I hope that Kevin brings some of that freshness. I'm sure he will. I mean, I've got to know him a little bit over the time he's been a member of the select board. I think he'll contribute meaningfully.
Yeah. Now tell us, you've also been involved in organizing a new group of businesses for gay business owners?
Yeah, so it's we call it Outnet. This is a collaboration with Bill Forniciari from BF Architects, the Chamber of Commerce, Bob Nolette, Cartmel Funeral Home. Oh boy, I feel like and of course the foundation. Yeah, so we collaborated to provide an opportunity for people to network after work. Yeah, so it's a monthly thing now, bi-monthly. This summer, we're thinking of evolving it into a monthly thing. And the numbers have grown. It's actually been a really great success. I think this is something that we sorely needed in the downtown. And it's evolved beyond just gay or lesbian. We call it Outnet, indiscriminate of any variable or letter, because we want to encourage people to come down and be allies and hang out, have a drink, have a conversation about the things that are affecting town and your business.
Now, when people hear about the foundation, do you have an endowment, or what is your revenue or income? Where do you get your funding?
So we're largely self-sustaining. We have an investment account. Before I arrived, sometime around 15 or 16, previous director bought a piece of land in South Plymouth for $500,000, market rate sale, and then they were able to sell that. So that kind of seeded the investment account that we.
How much did you sell it for?
I don't remember, but it was more than $500,000. I know that. So it did give us a good cushion. We have about $2.5 million in our account right now, and that produces some income for us. But we also have an agreement with the town that produces about $150,000 a year to help support programming specific for the town of Plymouth. But we also are very competitive with grants, and knock on wood, I've been very successful in attracting a number of grants to help support our mission.
So tell us a little bit about some of the projects that you've had.
Sure. I'll tell you about the first, the 3 signature projects, and then I'll tell you a little bit more about what we're working on in this year. Is that okay? So we first launched the Plymouth Poet Laureate program, which strikes some people as a little unorthodox for economic development, and it is until you realize that having some of these poetry events in our local businesses like Unza, it fills the place. There's nothing that goes better than poetry with poetry than wine. So it's one of those things that we instituted to help support the local arts economy, and we're in our 6th year now. The next big thing that I think that we did chronologically was we launched the Children's Business Fair. So this is a fair opportunity for all 5th graders across the Plymouth public school system. Last year, we had 306 kids participate. The fair has grown so large that we had to segment it. We had to bifurcate it into 2 separate fairs over two separate weeks. This year, in fact, our friends at Local Scene were on site at the business fair. So there's excellent footage out there. If you're watching at home, look it up on YouTube on the Local Scene YouTube channel. You're going to find some amazing products that these kids produced. I think last year's big winner was a gentleman who was selling honey from his grandfather's honeybee farm in Carver. 2 different harvests, one from July, one from September. He sold out and made $1,200 that night. Another gentleman was selling what they call walking tacos at this year's fair. He made $550 in 2 hours. So, I mean, are you smarter than a 5th grader? I'm not making that much money an hour, so it may not be. These kids are brilliant, and it really does show what the entrepreneurial spirit is in Plymouth. And then the third project that we launched, we're going into our 4th year, is called the Blue Economy Conference, or what we call Blue Future Conference. The whole point of that is to highlight what I call ABC, right? Asset-based community development to achieve your economic and fiscal goals, right? Blue economy, we have 37 miles of coastline. We have a company here in Plymouth right now called Green Sea IQ that launches submarines out of cordage. We have the power plant decommissioning. In my conversations with the Navy Small Business Office, they instruct, or at least encourage, the people leaving service to focus on things like AI, quantum, and robotics. We have the basis for those things right now, and with the decommissioning, I believe that gives us a new opportunity to reinvent how we talk about Plymouth, more than just seasonal tourism and cranberry bogs. I have a fight with my colleagues at the state level constantly to educate them that Plymouth is so much more than those things. So the Blue Economy Conference is intended to highlight things like the high growth potential for companies, high pay jobs in areas like AI, quantum, R&D, and robotics. And we also include aquaculture. It's kind of a low hanging fruit. With 37 miles of coastline, you can imagine how ripe that could be for someone who's interested in pursuing a kelp farm.
Poetry doesn't surprise me at all, when you mention that, because when I first became an elected official, it was on the school committee. Mm-hmm. And people might say, well, why, as an attorney having a business in Plymouth, would you want to be on the school committee? Well, it's because, as you said, the quality of life, that I wanted good schools, good education, not only for my children, but for the community, because I know that that's good for business to have good schools. And so to have all these other things are also good. And when you talk about Plymouth, coming here because of the quality of life, I mean, I would have to agree. I mean, that's another reason why I'm moderator, because we want to have good legislature. We want to make good laws. We want to have a good budget. I mean, all these things are all very important. It all works into, we all have the same goal.
Mm-hmm.
If you want it good for business, for example, or good quality of life to live here, then all these things have to go well.
Can I just say about that quality of life? It doesn't look like it now, but when I was a kid, in high school, I would run through the trails in Yarmouth, around the cranberry bogs in Yarmouth, where I lived. The conservation and the natural environment is a really big part of that quality of life. Some people think that economic development is antithetical in some way to conservation or open space and recreation, and it's really not. In fact, I mentioned earlier that all economic development is, in fact, it's democratic. We respond to the demands of the community. And we respond to the vision and the mission that's set out by the town to help them achieve their goals. We have our own goals too, but in every way, we want to ensure that quality of life is what is enhanced. And so we have no interest in cutting down trees. In fact, the project I mentioned a moment ago, to get 33 acres of developable area, the town put 136 acres into conservation. So there is a way for these two things to coexist so the town can achieve both goals.
And I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, I think that business development and being a good place for business goes hand in hand with conservation and recreation and open space. And coming back to the election, this past week, some people think it was a message for change. Other people say, well, it's for conservation and open space. But I think, again, you can do it all.
we can certainly do it all. See, other places I've lived and worked, they were talking about how to create a tourism sector or an industry. I mentioned Springfield earlier. They have the International Basketball Hall of Fame. They have Interstate 91 that brings right from Montreal right through into the city. I mean, there's all these other assets and resources that these other communities have, and they weren't really able to develop what we have in Plymouth. With this new board in place, I mean, message received. I mean, you guys set the vision as voters, and then the town adopts whatever the policies are and the regulations, and then we help the town execute the goals, right? I don't see the election as an indictment on anybody necessarily. I think it's a reflection of where we are as a community and where we want to see ourselves go.
I may have told you this before, but my son Franklin was an attorney at the firm, has a Master of Fine Arts, and one summer he was working as a videographer for a local video company, and they asked him to make a video for a community in New Hampshire, and it was a community very similar to Plymouth. It happens to be Wolfboro. And I was thinking to myself as he was getting ready, I was thinking, well, of course, you know, you can talk about this restaurant and this gift shop and, you know, these other places where we go and shop at the store. No, his video, he starts out, he's showing the lake and he's showing a loon and he's showing, you know, our dog up on a mountain and he's showing butterflies. I mean, in the mountains and the water, but he captured it. He didn't do what I was thinking as someone in business. He captured the reason why people would want to come to this community. And that's so much like Plymouth. Why do people want to come here?
People spend fortunes to be able to spend a week in Plymouth in the summer. And how fortunate are we that we get to live here? We get to live proximate to these things that people pay a fortune for. Cost of housing is high. That's obvious. That's because the secret got out. Everyone figured out that this is the place you want to be. Transportation isn't nearly as robust as it needs to be for who we are today. In fact, I mean, you know this, we talked about this. Plymouth is the 15th or 16th most populous community in the Commonwealth. The top 25 are all cities. We're the only town. And that's not a political statement. That's a reality of where we are right now. We still see ourselves as a small town, but the fact is we're one of the most populous communities in the Commonwealth, and the infrastructure hasn't caught up. The policies haven't caught up. The tax base hasn't caught up. 53% of our businesses in town are owned by people or operated by people with fewer than 2 employees. Right? 75% have fewer than 20 employees. I mean, we're still very much a small town mindset, and that makes sense. But the fact is the quality of life is changing a little bit. People are starting to begrudge how popular we've become, and that does have negative returns on that quality of life. So infrastructure needs to be improved. Policies need to be updated. Zoning maybe needs to be re-explored. But the fact of the matter is we don't even have enough jobs in town for the number of residents who do work. We have 23 or 24,000 people driving out of town every day to go to work. 11% are driving to Boston. What's their quality of life like? 3% are going to Cape Cod. Now, we have 17,000 people driving into town. It's not a popular talking point, but the reality is the reality. We only get to exist the way we do, Steve, because we have a servant class of people who are willing to drive in town, work in our restaurants, work in our retail, work in the tourism and hospitality sectors, and then they drive out. One, because they can't afford to live here. 60% of the people who are driving in are making under $40,000 a year. The median household income prior to the pandemic was about $85,000. Cops, teachers, right? I mean, that's a very blue-collar salary. Since the pandemic, we're north of about $120,000. And it's not necessarily because Plymouth residents got richer. It's because people moved into Plymouth, raised the rates and the expenses for all of us, and they brought with them their wealth. So they moved the bar on all of us, on all categories, almost over the course of the 2 or 3 years that we were doing these kinds of broadcasts remotely. We didn't see it on the ground then. There's nothing we could have done to change that. What we're left with now, and why I'm okay with a new board, is because, you know, we need new people in there to solve these new types of problems that we haven't encountered before.
Well, you talked earlier about we live here, and it's almost like we take it for granted. It's interesting. I often dine at a restaurant that I represent down on the waterfront, and my wife will always say, well, let's not get back on the highway. Let's take the back roads. Let's go all along Water Street and enjoy. And of course, we do it all the time, but it's just, you don't even think about it. You do it. You enjoy that. But again, for many of us here, I think we take it for granted, but we do know that it's quite a gem that we have here.
Yeah, you know, I think it's also important to say, not that this is a problem in Plymouth, but other tourism towns have this type of problem. I mean, it's important for us to maintain courteous reception of our guests, right? And I think that contributes also meaningfully to our quality of life and our own expectations of each other. If we greet our guests with kindness and understanding and patience, I just saw someone trying to take a picture of the waterfront, but standing in the middle of Court Street. And traffic was on both sides, you know. So, I mean, those are the kinds of things that happen in a tourism town. People just love our town so much that they want to take these types of things, and it does create some kind of an inconvenience for us.
We've always known that Plymouth is the county seat, and it's a hub. But what struck me a few years back was when I was at a chamber luncheon, those networking luncheons, and a young member sat near me, old enough to be my child or grandchild, and she said to me, I said, well, you know, where do you live? Well, I don't live in Plymouth. I work in Plymouth, but I live nearby. But I always come to Plymouth. I come to Plymouth to eat. I come to Plymouth for entertainment and so on. And I thought to myself, wow, you know, this really is a destination, not just for tourism, but just for people to live. And they want to, even if they're not living, and she did say, and I'd like to move to Plymouth. But, you know, even if they don't live here, they want to come here. They want to be here.
It's true. You know, that's what makes us in some ways a center city, right? I mean, there's that brand reputation. Other cities that I've worked, I mean, it was hard to have that conversation with the local residential population about how cool the place was. They had seen too much. They'd become jaded. We don't have that problem in Plymouth. Everyone in Plymouth is already convinced how cool we already are. Lee Filson, who is the director of tourism at Sea Plymouth, she has a great line, locals are tourists too. And if you can get locals to come into Plymouth from Carver or Rochester even, or even obviously Cape Cod, maybe someone's on their way up from Providence and giving them an alternative to something like Provincetown or Boston, you know, those are locals that can travel regionally within a day and can make their way to Plymouth and have an excellent experience. The only thing I lament, and there's a real raw economic reality here, Mondays and Tuesdays are very slow in the downtown. But Mondays and Tuesdays, that's the weekend for our shopkeeps. They work on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, just like, you know, like the rest of us. Monday and Tuesday's their weekend off. Well, why don't they stay open? They'll be able to make more money. Yeah, but you have more people in your ecosystem who are contributing to your tourism economy. That makes it more possible. So I would like to work with Lee Filson in my new role as chairman of the Sea Plymouth local board to really kind of have a meeting of the minds and a meshing of economic development and tourism. I mentioned the convention center or conference hall. That's something I think that we can do to really amp up the type of tourism we see. Right now, we see a lot of families and couples, right? Imagine, though, if we had a conference here in town that had 200, 300, 500 businessmen. I remember working at a restaurant where someone dropped a card for a $5,000 bill, and 20% of that bill, that pays your rent for the month. So I would like to see us do more to enhance the tourism experience so that we can kind of capture Mondays and Tuesdays. But in the time you've been moderated, you've certainly seen the town change from a seasonal economy to something that's almost full-time now. We really don't have much of a shoulder season anymore. January, February, maybe half of March.
No, it's a great place in which to live and a great place in which to work. Bringing us back to what we started talking about earlier, the elections. That's why elections are so important. They do matter because we talked about the select board, but even the school committee, you know, it's very important because we had candidates that had very diverse views on what would be important for public education. And so the voters spoke as to what they wanted. And planning. Mm-hmm. We had planning board candidates, again, that weren't necessarily the same. Mm-hmm. And so it makes a difference.
Well, look, I'm just some guy, and I just work for some nonprofit, right? We're not in charge of any regulatory scene. We're not in charge of permitting. So I'll tell you what I told the select board when I was first hired. We can come to the table with all the best ideas, not even our own ideas, the best ideas, and all the money to pay for them. But if the town doesn't permit them, then they won't happen. So you're right, the planning board is a really instrumental partner in development and growth and conservation. If they don't permit it, it doesn't happen. Conservation Commission, if they don't permit it, it doesn't happen. In some instances, you have the ZBA. It's the same thing, right? But now you're talking about appointed boards and elected boards. The fact is, get involved. I mean, if you really do care and when you want to have a place where you can live or a place where you can work, a place your kids can recreate, you need to be involved because these are the types of things we need to hear from so that we know what to work on.
Now, when you're not in your role as executive director and you're just out doing your thing, what do you like to do in your free time?
I'm basically always like this, Steve. I don't have much free time, but I do like red wine. Red wine is one of my favorite recreational things to do myself. And my husband and I just got our back deck set up for the summer. We'll have to have you out.
Okay.
No, we'll I really like downtime with my family these days. My sister has 3 nephews who I love. My brother has a daughter, my niece, who I love and I miss. So I really like to spend time with my family.
So again, if people want to contact you, how do they do that?
So Stephen, STEPHEN .Cole, COLE, at plymouth-ma.biz is the best way to reach me.
And for people that might have joined us partway through and didn't see the entire presentation, what would be your one big takeaway that you'd want them to know about the Plymouth Foundation?
Plymouth Foundation, our mission is to enhance quality of life, and that includes things like reinforcing built environments so that people can have jobs and businesses, but it also includes things like preserving conservation and recreation.
Stephen Cole,
Such a pleasure, sir.
Executive Director, Plymouth Regional Economic Development Foundation.
That's it.
Okay, good. It's a mouthful for sure. Thank you for being with us again.
Thank you for having me.
This completes this presentation of Plymouth Profiles. Please join us in the future when we welcome other people from the greater Plymouth community who are making a difference. My name is Steve Triffletti, and I'm Plymouth Town Moderator. Thank you for joining us. Good day.